Hello and welcome to our second part of our course where we're going to take the concepts that we looked at in Why Nations Fail and apply them to a particular geography in the world, in this case sub-Saharan Africa. I've chosen sub-Saharan Africa for a number of reasons. One is that it's a very complex mix. It's very little understood. Americans and Europeans tend to think of Africa in terms of what their high school geography teachers taught them, and don't really go much further in trying to understand this very rich and complex environment. I've had the good fortune to work in sub-Saharan Africa for the last 10 years. I've spent a lot of time in the western part of Africa, in Liberia, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Niger. These countries are all very unique, very different countries, and I think they're a very good place to look at the concepts that we studied in Why Nations Fail, because all of them are what we might call development states, and they're all on different trajectories in terms of their development and where they're moving. Some of them were colonies. Most were colonies of either the British or the French. Liberia was not a colony, but it was founded by freed American slaves from the 19th century, and they they came to Africa and effectively colonized Liberia, although that's really not how the history is viewed. But in any case, let's move forward and look a little bit into what constitutes sub-Saharan Africa, and then we'll in the next few weeks we'll start diving deeper. So here are a couple things that we want to say about Africa. Certainly we all know that Africa remains one of the poorest regions on the planet. This is a sad fact and something that the global community has been trying to rectify. But the fact of the matter is that if you look at India, if you just look at numbers, there are many more poor people. If you use a metric of living under $1 or $2 a day, there are many more poor people actually who live in India than live in Africa. However, that doesn't suggest that Africa doesn't have problems. Many remedies for this poverty have been tried, and many have failed, and we'll discuss some of that in weeks ahead. Um, there have been a lot of successes along the way in terms of building democracy, in terms of building economies. But there have also been many setbacks, and most of the top 20 countries on the Fragile State Index, as you saw, are in sub-Saharan Africa, and they remain there. Africa also suffers from the four plagues of war, disease, environmental devastation, and economic mismanagement. There's also a tremendous amount of outside interference in African affairs, so it is it's a real challenge for leaders to move their countries forward. And then we finally ask, do we have a duty coming from wealthy nations to try to help Africa? And if we are going to help them, what kind of help is needed? Because so much of it hasn't worked, and you may have your own opinions about that. We can bring some discussion to that question. So, if we want to understand Africa, what the first thing that we really ought to grasp is that prior to 1885, Africa was a much different continent. There were vast areas that weren't really constituted, that did not constitute nation states. There were big tribal groupings that crossed the borders of countries that exist today, and there was a completely different social and political reality than what occurred after 1885. And if that had been allowed to evolve naturally, obviously the continent would look a lot different than it does today. However, in 1885 in Europe, the colonial powers, particularly the British, the French, the English, and the Germans, got together and divided up Africa according to their own needs and interests, and that really was the map of Africa until post-war brought the beginnings of the anti-colonial movement. Post-World War II brought the beginnings of the anti-colonial movement, and then as we get into the 1960s, 1970s, we have wars of national liberation, and we have the creation of the countries that we know today. However, by the time of independence, the Cold War was in full swing. And that was really Russia and to a certain extent China versus the United States and Europe in a really showdown for global domination. Backed up by nuclear weapons. So it was a very trying time, and for Africa it was a very very challenging and really horrific time because African countries essentially became the site of proxy wars between East and West, between the United States and Russia, and many millions of people died and suffered tremendous loss because of this sort of global geopolitical contest that was going on. After the Cold War ended, the international community decided to step in and see what they could do to help Africa, and you had organizations like the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, large charities and humanitarian organizations, such as the Gates Foundation, the International Committee of the Red Cross, and you name it, every humanitarian, or Save the Children, all the UN organizations, they're all working in Africa. And then you also have big aid programs coming from different countries. You have USAID, which is the foreign aid branch of the US State Department. You have DFID, which is the foreign aid branch of the British government, pouring billions and billions of dollars into Africa. And it becomes an obsession that has borne mixed results. And in 2000, you had the formation of the Millennium Development Goals on the part of the UN, which was an attempt to bring all of these organizations and to have them focus on a core set of issues that would allegedly bring Africa out of poverty. But 15 years later, many of those challenges remain. So, what about today? Well, Africa is the source of much of the world's natural resources. So, if you're talking about oil, gold, diamonds, the specialized minerals that are used in your cell phones and your computers, Africa has an abundance of all that. Therefore, it's a prime economic interest to the rest of the world. It also has a huge, fast-growing, very young population of potential workers and potential consumers. So, from an economic point of view, Africa is becoming increasingly interesting to outside investors, and because of the flat economic growth that the rest of the world is experiencing, in Africa you have these very fast-rising countries with sort of 8-9% growth rates per year, and international investors who have a higher than average risk tolerance can reap the benefits of those. And you have many more countries that are democratic or moving towards democracy, and that's a very good thing. However, many of the problems remain, and some people will say that the biggest problem is corruption and poor governance. They have not developed the institutions that Acemoglu and Robinson talk about in Why Nations Fail. You have oligarchies continuing to rule, and that tends to be the norm in many countries. You see, ironically, that democracy is often the source of instability rather than an engine of progress. You have ethnic groups, tribal groups competing in democratic elections, but if the elections don't go their way, it can often lead to violence. So that's one of the challenges of trying to have peaceful democratic transitions of government. Then you have natural resource exploitation, which we talked about, but it's often done for the benefit of the few, for the elites, and there's also generally complete disregard for the environment unless there's severe international pressure put on those projects. And young people are often prey to a host of radical ideas that undermine development efforts. You can see it in Nigeria with Boko Haram. You see it Al Shabaab in Somalia. You can see it in the Congo. You can see it in Kenya. That young people are brought into these radical groups that are feeling marginalized, and the result is extreme violence and extreme alienation from the society. And a large portion of the blame for all of this could be that the educational institutions are in major disrepair, and it's a shame that a lot more development effort isn't put into fixing the educational system. So that's basically what I have to say about Africa. We could say, well, what can be done? Well, ultimately these problems will have to be solved by the Africans themselves. Outsiders can and should provide assistance, but it needs to be done in a way that's in line with a country's ability to respond to that assistance, as well as having the skills to carry on with whatever programs are brought in, because it's not good enough just to have foreigners come in and do something and then disappear. In our next textbook, African Economies and the Politics of Permanent Crisis, we'll take a long look at these issues, and we'll look at perhaps some policy recommendations on how we can do things differently. So, thank you.